By age 3, the average child already knows over 1,000 words and can construct grammatically correct sentences, without a single lesson, a single textbook, or a single test. Adults who dedicate years to language study often cannot come close to that level of fluency. Something extraordinary is happening inside the developing mind, and scientists are only beginning to understand exactly what it is. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover the hidden biological machinery behind childhood language acquisition, why your brain as a child was fundamentally different from your brain today, and the one counterintuitive truth about language learning that completely changes how we should approach it as adults. There is a window of time in human development that, once closed, cannot fully reopen. Understanding why that window exists, and what happens inside it, might be the most important thing you ever learn about language itself. Let us start at the very beginning. Language is arguably the most complex skill a human being ever acquires. It involves mastering thousands of vocabulary items, an intricate system of grammar rules, the subtle music of pronunciation, and the social intelligence to use all of it in real time. Linguists have spent centuries trying to fully describe the grammar of a single language, and none of them have completely succeeded. Yet children do all of this, automatically, before they can tie their shoes. The scientific study of how this happens really took off in the 1950s and 1960s, when a young linguist named Noam Chomsky turned the entire field upside down. Before Chomsky, most researchers believed children learned language the same way they learned everything else, through imitation and reward. You hear a word, you copy it, someone praises you, you remember it. Simple behavioral conditioning. Chomsky argued this could not possibly be the whole story. He pointed out something now called the poverty of the stimulus. The language children hear around them is incomplete, full of errors, and missing crucial information. Yet children consistently produce sentences they have never heard before and apply grammar rules they were never explicitly taught. Chomsky concluded that humans must come pre-wired with some kind of innate language capacity. He called it the language acquisition device, a hypothetical mental structure dedicated entirely to cracking the code of whatever language surrounds the child. Decades of research since then have refined and challenged this idea, but one thing remains undeniable. Children do not learn language the way adults learn a skill. They absorb it. The distinction matters enormously. Here is something that almost nobody talks about in language learning communities. The child is not trying to learn the language. The child is trying to communicate. The language is the side effect. When a toddler points at a dog and says the word for dog, they are not practicing vocabulary. They are desperately trying to connect with another human being. That urgency, that raw communicative drive, generates thousands of hours of intensive, emotionally charged exposure over the first few years of life. No adult language learner recreates that kind of immersion, because no adult has that kind of unfiltered social need. Now let us talk about the brain itself, because this is where things get genuinely fascinating. From birth to roughly age 5, the human brain is building neural connections at a pace that will never be matched again in a lifetime. At peak development, a child's brain forms up to 1 million new neural connections every single second. The brain is essentially overbuilding on purpose, creating far more connections than it will ever need, then pruning away the ones that are not regularly used. Language, because it is used constantly and urgently from day one, carves deep, permanent pathways through this rapidly growing neural architecture. This is the foundation of what researchers call the critical period hypothesis. First formally proposed by neurologist Wilder Penfield in the 1950s and later developed by linguist Eric Lenneberg in 1967, the hypothesis states that there is a biologically determined window, roughly from birth to puberty, during which language acquisition happens with exceptional ease and completeness. After puberty, as the brain finishes its major development phase, those extraordinary neural pathways become fixed. The brain shifts from a state of explosive growth to one of efficient maintenance. Learning still happens, but it works differently and costs far more effort. The most compelling evidence for the critical period comes from tragic natural experiments. Researchers have studied cases of children who were severely isolated during their early years with almost no language exposure. The outcomes are heartbreaking and scientifically significant. These individuals, even after intensive instruction later in life, never fully acquired the grammar of their native language. Vocabulary could be taught, but the deep structural intuition for how sentences work, that remained permanently out of reach. The window had closed. But here is what nobody fully explains about what happens during those early years. It is not just about exposure time. It is about the quality of engagement. Researchers Patricia Kuhl, Andrew Meltzoff, and colleagues at the University of Washington ran a landmark study comparing how babies acquired sounds from different sources. One group of babies received live social interaction with Mandarin-speaking adults. Another group watched the exact same content on video. The babies who had live social interaction showed measurable learning. The babies who watched the screen showed almost none. The brain was not simply recording sounds. It was responding to a living, breathing social partner. The social brain and the language brain were operating as one system. This tells us something profound. Children learn language so effortlessly partly because their brains are maximally sensitive to social interaction. Every conversation, every shared glance, every moment of joint attention between a child and a caregiver is simultaneously a social event and a language lesson. The emotional connection is not separate from the learning. It is the mechanism of the learning itself. Think about the sheer volume this generates. Researchers Betty Hart and Todd Risley conducted a long-term study tracking how many words children heard in their homes. They found that by age 4, children in highly verbal households had heard approximately 45 million words. Children in less verbal households had heard roughly 13 million. That 32 million word gap had measurable effects on vocabulary size, reading ability, and academic performance that persisted for years. The input was not passive. Every word heard was heard in a social context, with a face, a tone of voice, and emotional coloring. The brain cataloged all of it. And what about grammar? How does a child figure out something as abstract as verb tense or sentence structure without anyone explaining it? The answer appears to involve pattern recognition at a scale that is almost incomprehensible. Children are statistical geniuses. Research by Jenny Safran at the University of Wisconsin demonstrated that babies as young as 8 months could detect statistical regularities in streams of syllables after just 2 minutes of exposure. They were unconsciously calculating which sounds tended to appear together and using that information to segment speech into words. No adult consciously does this. Children do it automatically, at lightning speed, purely through exposure. This capacity gradually diminishes with age. Not because adults become less intelligent, but because the brain has already committed to the patterns of whatever language was learned first. The neural real estate is occupied. Every new language sound, every new grammar structure, must now be processed through the filter of the established system rather than absorbed fresh. That is why adult learners almost always carry an accent. The phonological map was drawn in childhood, and it is remarkably resistant to revision. The implications of all this for adult language learning are both sobering and genuinely liberating. The sobering part is that you cannot fully recreate the conditions of childhood acquisition. That window is real, its effects are real, and pretending otherwise will only frustrate you. The liberating part is this. You now understand exactly why children succeed so effortlessly. It is not magic. It is biology, social connection, emotional urgency, and an incomprehensible volume of meaningful input delivered through human relationship. None of those elements are completely unavailable to adults. They just require conscious, deliberate effort to approximate. The children who learn language so effortlessly are not doing anything clever. Before you go, if you learned something valuable today, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Langbridge for a brand new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.